Anatomy of the small intestine. Although the duodenum is anatomically indistinguishable from the rest of the small intestine, in surgical terms it may be regarded as a distinct structure and is discussed in Chapter 67. The small intestine lies between the duodenojejunal (DJ) flexure and the ileocecal valve, Figure 74.1. It is difficult to establish the length of the small intestine. It varies widely between subjects. It is said to be longer in men, and estimates gathered at surgery, at postmortem and during radiological investigations have been noted to vary widely, even in the same individual. Most studies, however, describe a range between 300 and 850 centimeters. The proximal 40% of the small intestine is referred to as the jejunum and the remainder is the ileum. There is no clear demarcation between jejunum and ileum, as the character of the small intestine changes gradually from proximal to distal. The jejunum tends to have a wider diameter and a thicker wall, with more prominent mucosal folds, valvulae connivens, while the ileum has a thicker, more fatty mesentery with more complex arterial arcades. The ileum also contains larger aggregates of lymph nodes, Peyer's patches, which can occasionally become the lead points in childhood intussusception. The small intestine has a rich blood supply, derived from the superior mesenteric artery, SMA, while venous drainage is via the portal venous system. The superior mesenteric vein joins the splenic vein to form the portal vein, which drains into the liver, carrying absorbed nutrients from the bowel for processing. The lymphatic drainage of the small intestine follows the arterial supply. The small intestine has a rich autonomic innervation arising from the splanchnic nerves, which contribute a dense net. Work of sympathetic fibers around the SMA and its branches. Referred pain from the small intestine is usually felt in the periumbilical region, T10. The blood and nerve supplies to the small intestine run in its mesentery, which is attached to the posterior abdominal wall and runs obliquely downwards to the right between the DJ flexure to the left of the second lumbar vertebra and the right sacroiliac joint. Important features of small bowel anatomy. Filled circle comprises jejunum and ileum. Filled circle has valvulae connivens. Filled circle blood supply from SMA. Physiology of the small intestine. The principal function of the small intestine is the digestion of food and absorption of nutrients, water and electrolytes. Carbohydrates and proteins are broken down in the intestinal lumen by pancreatic enzymes, but the funnel hydrolysis takes place at the brush border of the jejunum, after which these nutrients are absorbed. Fats are digested chiefly by the actions of pancreatic lipase and bile salts. The products of fat digestion, fatty acids and monoglycerides, separate from bile salts in the jejunum and are absorbed for further processing. The jejunum is the principal site for digestion and absorption of fluid, electrolytes, iron, folate, fat, protein and carbohydrate. But the absorption of bile salts and vitamin B12 only occurs in the terminal ileum, where there are specific transporters. If the jejunum is resected, the ileum can assume all the required absorptive functions, but resection of the terminal ileum will result in a diminished bile salt pool, vitamin B12 deficiency, and may lead to deficiency of the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, A and K. The ileum also plays an important role in water absorption, possibly because the tightness of the intercellular junctions supports a concentration gradient across its lumen. Significant ileal resection therefore commonly results in very troublesome diarrhea. The small intestine plays an important role in the metabolism of plasma lipoproteins, as it is the main site of synthesis of high-density, low-density and very low-density lipoproteins, HDL, LDL, VLDL. These particles transport most of the absorbed dietary fat to the systemic circulation via the lymph. The small bowel also synthesizes intestinal hormones such as glucagon-like peptides GLP-1 and 2, peptide YY and motilin, which interact with the enteric nervous system to modulate intestinal function, growth and differentiation. Inflammatory bowel disease. The term, inflammatory bowel disease, is reserved for conditions characterized by the presence of idiopathic intestinal inflammation. Conditions such as infective or ischemic enteritis are, by definition, excluded. Crohn's disease, CD, is the only known inflammatory bowel disease that affects the small intestine and is covered in detail in chapter. Infective enteritis. Campylobacter infection with Campylobacter jejuni, a gram-negative rod with a distinctive spiral shape, is the most common form of bacterial gastroenteritis in the UK, typically acquired from eating infected poultry. It causes diarrhea and abdominal pain and may mimic an acute abdomen. Severe cases may resemble ulcerative colitis, with rectal bleeding and colorectal ulceration, causing diagnostic difficulty. The organism is fastidious in culture and may take several days to isolate in the laboratory. Toxic dilatation and even disintegrative colitis have rarely been reported to occur. Treatment is generally supportive as the condition usually resolves without antibiotics. It is a notifiable disease. Yersinia. Yersinia enterocolitica is a gram-negative rod that can infect the terminal ileum, appendix, ascending colon and mesenteric lymph nodes, and can cause a granulomatous inflammatory process that may mimic CD. Yersinia typically causes a fever and gastroenteritis, but may persist and cause a terminal ileitis, which, on occasion, may perforate. The diagnosis may be made on stool culture, but is more often confirmed serologically. If discovered at laparotomy, the terminal ileum and mesenteric nodes will look thickened and inflamed and a lymph node biopsy can be taken for diagnostic purposes. The disease is normally self-limiting, but responds to treatment with cotrimoxazole or chloramphenicol antibiotics. Salmonella. Typhoid and paratyphoid salmonella are a family of gram-negative rods that can cause a range of enteric infections. Salmonella gastroenteritis is typically caused by Salmonella enteritidis from poultry and is most often a self-limiting illness comprising headache, fever and watery diarrhea. When severe, antibiotics and hospitalization and intravenous fluids may be needed. The diagnosis is based on stool culture. Shigella and enteropathogenic strains of Escherichia coli may cause similar diarrheal illnesses. Typhoid fever is caused by Salmonella enterica in presence, with fever and abdominal pain after an incubation period of 10 to 20 days. Over the next week, the patient can develop distension, diarrhea, splenomegaly and characteristic rose spots on the abdomen caused by a vasculitis. Typhoid is a systemic infection and diagnosis of typhoid is confirmed by culture of blood or stool. Treatment is by antibiotics, usually chloramphenicol. A number of surgical complications can result, including paralytic ileus, intestinal hemorrhage, free ileal perforation and cholecystitis. Invasion of the systemic circulation, which is a characteristic feature of salmonellosis, may cause severe gram-negative sepsis, resulting in septic shock. Some patients develop metastatic sepsis, including septic arthritis and osteomyelitis, meningitis, encephalitis, disseminated intravascular coagulation and pancreatitis. Perforation of a typhoid ulcer characteristically occurs during the third week of the illness, although it is sometimes the FRST clinical sign of the disease. The ulcer is parallel to the long axis of the gut and is usually situated in the distal ileum. Perforation requires surgery to wash out and close the ulcer and intestinal resection is usually avoided. In unstable patients, notably with evidence of septic shock, the bowel should be exteriorized and the perforation closed after recovery. Paratyphoid infection, with Salmonella paratyphi A, resembles typhoid fever and is treated in a similar manner. See Chapter 6. Tuberculosis of the intestine. Tuberculosis, like CD, can affect any part of the gastrointestinal tract. The sites affected most often are the ileum, proximal colon and peritoneum. There are two principal disease presentations. Ulcerative tuberculosis. Ulcerative tuberculosis develops secondary to pulmonary tuberculosis and arises as a result of swallowing tubercle bacilli. Multiple ulcers, lying transversely, develop in the terminal ileum and the overlying serosa is thickened, reddened and covered in tubercles. Patients typically present with diarrhea and weight loss, although subacute obstruction and even local perforation and fistula formation can occur. A barium follow-through or computed tomography (CT) examination fails to show phlegm of the distal ileum, cecum and the ascending colon as a result of narrowing of the ulcerated segment, figure 74.2. A course of antituberculous chemotherapy usually leads to cure, provided the pulmonary tuberculosis is adequately treated. Surgery is usually undertaken only in the rare event of a perforation or complete intestinal obstruction. Hypoplastic tuberculosis. This is caused by the ingestion of Mycobacterium tuberculosis by patients with a high resistance to the organism. The infection usually occurs in the ileocecal region, although solitary and multiple lesions in the distal ileum are also sometimes seen. The infection establishes itself in lymphoid follicles, and the resulting chronic inflammation causes thickening of the intestinal wall and narrowing of the lumen. There is early involvement of the regional lymph nodes, which may caseate. Unlike in CD, abscess and fistula formation are uncommon. Patients usually present with attacks of abdominal pain and intermittent diarrhea. There is incomplete ileal obstruction, leading to stasis and bacterial overgrowth. This in turn causes steatorrhea, anemia and loss of weight. Patients may present with a mass in the right iliac fossa and vague ill health. The differential diagnosis is that of an appendix mass, lymphoma, carcinoma of the cecum, CD, tuberculosis or actinomycosis. A barium follow through a small bowel enema will show a long narrow phlegm defect in the terminal ileum, which may result in a differential diagnosis of CD. CT will also demonstrate the narrowed segment with proximal distension and the associated lymphadenopathy. When the diagnosis is clear and the patient has not yet developed obstructive symptoms, treatment with antituberculous medication is advised and may be curative. Where obstruction is present, or the possibility of CD or lymphoma requires clarification, ileocecal resection is often required. See chapters 6 and 65. Actinomycosis. Abdominal actinomycosis is rare. It is caused by infection with Actinomyces israelii and usually develops several weeks after an apparently straightforward perforated appendicitis. An abscess develops and spreads to the retroperitoneal tissues in the adjacent abdominal wall, eventually becoming the seat of multiple indurated discharging sinuses. At FRST, the discharge from the sinuses is thin, watery and inoffensive, but it may later become thicker and malodorous. Secondary fistulation may occur and the tissues may become extensively indurated and woody. In contrast to tuberculosis, however, mesenteric lymph nodes are not involved and the lumen of the intestine is not narrowed. Hematogenous spread via the portal vein may lead to multiple liver abscesses. Pus should be sent for bacteriological examination, which will reveal the characteristic sulfur granules. Penicillin or cotrimoxazole treatment is required and should be prolonged and in high dosage. Human immunodeficiency virus. Human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, infection is associated with a number of proctological problems. See chapter 80. Intestinal complications are common after the development of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS, when opportunistic organisms can cause gastroenteritis. Summary box 74.2. HIV may also cause a specific enteropathy. Treatment is directed towards the relevant organism and surgery should be avoided if possible. Opportunistic intestinal infections in patients with AIDS. Bacterial filled circle Salmonella filled circle Shigella filled circle Yersinia filled circle Campylobacter filled circle Mycobacterium avium intracellular, May. Viral filled circle Cytomegalovirus. Filled circle Protozoal filled circle Cryptosporidium filled circle Giardia. Filled circle Fungal filled circle Candida albicans. Tumors of the small intestine. Small bowel tumors are rare and in total account for less than 10% of gastrointestinal neoplasia. Benign. The majority of small bowel neoplasms are benign, comprising adenomas, lipomas, hemangiomas and neurogenic tumors. They are frequently asymptomatic and identified incidentally. But can present with intussusception, small bowel obstruction and bleeding that may cause anemia or may even be overt. Where these lesions do cause anemia, the cause can be difficult to diagnose, as CT or small bowel contrast studies do not show them easily. Capsule endoscopy or small bowel endoscopy have been used successfully where the facilities exist. Symptomatic lesions can be treated by small bowel resection. Peutz-Jeghers syndrome. This is an autosomal dominant condition characterized by melanosis of the mouth and lips, with multiple hematomatous, benign tumor-like malformations resulting from faulty development in an organ, polyps in the small bowel and colon, figure 74.3. Melanin spots can also occur on the digits and perianal skin. Mutation of the STK11 gene on chromosome 19 has been found in a proportion of patients. Long-term follow-up of the original family described by Peutz has shown reduced survival as a consequence of complications of bowel obstruction and the development of a range of cancers. Regular colonic surveillance should be performed and female patients should attend breast and cervical screening. Despite the increased risk of malignancy in general, malignant change in the polyps themselves is uncommon. Resection may be indicated, however, for heavy and persistent or recurrent bleeding or intussusception. Polyps may be removed by enterotomy or, at laparotomy, snared via a colonoscope introduced via an enterotomy. Heavily involved segments of small intestine may occasionally be resected. Malignant small bowel malignancy is rare, classically presents late and is most often diagnosed after surgery for small bowel obstruction. 4 types will be considered, which account for over 99% of small bowel malignancies: adenocarcinoma, neuroendocrine tumors, NETs, lymphomas and gastrointestinal stromal tumors, GISTs. Adenocarcinoma. Small bowel adenocarcinoma is more often found in the jejunum than in the ileum and, although the etiology is unknown, it is more common in patients with CD, celiac disease, familial adenomatous polyposis, hereditary non-polyposis colon cancer and Peutz-Jeghers syndrome. The tumors present with anemia, overt gastrointestinal bleeding, intussusception or obstruction. Prognosis is poor, particularly in patients with CD, in whom these tumors often present late because the symptoms are commonly mistaken for those of CD and treated conservatively. When diagnosed, surgical treatment is a resection of 5 cm of non-involved bowel either side of the lesion in the affected mesentery, figure 74.4. A right hemicolectomy is likely to be required for tumors of the distal ileum. Neuroendocrine tumors NETs, previously known as carcinoid tumors, occur throughout the gastrointestinal tract, most commonly in the appendix, ileum and rectum in decreasing order of frequency. They arise from Kulczycki cells at the base of intestinal crypts, of Lieberkühn. The primary is usually small, although significant lymph node metastases can occur. In up to 1/3 of cases of small bowel NETs, the tumors are multiple. They may produce dense fibrosis in the surrounding tissues, resulting in distortion and scarring of the bowel and associated mesentery, giving them a characteristic radiological appearance. NETs can produce a number of vasoactive peptides. most commonly 5-hydroxytryptamine, serotonin, but also histamine, prostaglandins and kallikrein. When they metastasize to the liver, the carcinoid syndrome can become evident because the vasoactive substances escape the filtering actions of the liver. The clinical syndrome itself consists of reddish-blue cyanosis, Fuchsing attacks, diarrhea, boborygmy, asthmatic attacks and, eventually, pulmonary and tricuspid stenosis, summary box 74.3. Classically, the Fuchsing attacks are induced by alcohol. Surgical resection is usually sufficient for patients with primary disease, but the incidence of recurrence is significant. Carcinoid syndrome, filled circle diarrhea, filled circle bronchospasm, filled circle facial, upper chest Fuchsing, filled circle palpitations, filled circle tricuspid regurgitation. The extent of disease can be assessed preoperatively using octreotide scanning, somatostatin receptor scintigraphy, which may detect otherwise clinically unapparent primary and secondary tumors. Plasma markers of tumor bulk, such as chromogranina concentrations, may be useful markers of disease recurrence, as well as of prognostic value. Hepatic resection can be carried out in patients with metastatic disease. The treatment has been transformed by the use of octreotide, a somatostatin analog, which reduces both Fuchsing and diarrhea, and octreotide cover is usually used in patients with a carcinoid syndrome who have surgery to prevent a carcinoid crisis resulting from liberation of vasoactive substances following handling of the tumor. NETs generally grow more slowly than most metastatic malignancies and patients may live with metastatic disease for many years. The tumor is not usually sensitive to chemo or radiotherapy, see Chapter 69. Lymphoma. Small bowel lymphoma may be primary or, more commonly, secondary to systemic lymphoma. The incidence of small bowel lymphoma is increased in patients with CD and immunodeficiency syndromes. The classification of lymphoma is beyond the scope of this chapter, but a number of points are worth noting briefly. It is rare for Hodgkin's lymphoma to affect the small bowel, and most Western-type lymphomas are non-Hodgkin's B-cell lymphomas. They usually present with anemia, bleeding, perforation, anorexia and weight loss. Small bowel T-cell lymphoma can develop in patients with celiac disease. It usually presents with worsening of the patient's diarrhea, pyrexia of unknown origin and local obstructive symptoms. Mediterranean lymphoma is found mostly in North Africa and the Middle East and is often widespread at diagnosis. Burkitt's lymphoma can aggressively affect the ileocecal region, particularly in children. The mainstay of treatment for these conditions is chemotherapy. However, surgery may be required for obstruction, perforation or bleeding. Gastrointestinal stromal tumors, GISTs, are mesenchymal tumors, and the distinction between benign and malignant types is difficult even on histological examination. Increased size and high levels of c-KIT, CD117, staining are associated with malignant potential. GISTs are found most commonly in the stomach but can be found in other parts of the gut. They occur most commonly in the 50 to 70-year age group. Although the cause is unknown, patients with neurofibromatosis have an increased risk of developing these types of tumor. Patients may be asymptomatic and the tumor may present as an incidental mass on a CT scan. Symptoms include lethargy, pain, nausea, hematemesis or melena. Surgery is the most effective way of treating GISTs as the tumor is radioresistant and is not sensitive to conventional chemotherapy. Imatinib is a tyrosine kinase inhibitor that has been shown to be effective in advanced cases and may also have a role in adjuvant treatment. It may be used preoperatively to reduce tumor size. However, the involuting tumor may perforate, precipitating a surgical crisis. See chapters 11 and 67. Connective tissue disorders. Intestinal diverticular, hollow outpouchings, are a common structural abnormality that can occur from the esophagus to the rectosigmoid junction. Small bowel diverticular may be congenital or acquired. In congenital diverticular, all three coats of the bowel are present in the wall of the diverticulum, e.g. Meckel's diverticulum. Acquired diverticular, these often develop in the jejunum and arise from the mesenteric side of the bowel as a result of mucosal herniation at the point of entry of the blood vessels, where there is a potential defect in the muscularis layer. Jejunal diverticular can vary in size and are frequently multiple. They are commonly asymptomatic and present as an incidental finding at surgery or on radiological imaging. However, they can result in malabsorption due to bacterial overgrowth, or present as an acute abdominal emergency if they become inflamed or perforate. Bleeding from a jejunal diverticulum is a rare complication compared with sigmoid diverticular disease. Elective resection of an affected small bowel segment causing malabsorption can be effective, provided there is only a limited amount of jejunum involved. If perforated jejunal diverticulitis is found at emergency laparotomy, a small bowel resection should be performed and a decision made between primary anastomosis and stoma formation. This will depend on the degree of contamination, physiological stability and local resources for managing a patient with a high-output jejunostomy. Complications resulting from extensive jejunal diverticulosis can be extremely difficult to treat. In severe cases, much of the proximal small intestine may be involved, effectively precluding resection. Prolonged antibiotic therapy for bacterial overgrowth may be preferable, and antibiotics, ciprofloxacin, rifaximin, may be rotated in an attempt to avoid antibiotic resistance. Limited resection, leaving remaining segments of affected jejunum, may be feasible, but may also fail to deal adequately with bacterial overgrowth, recurrent attacks of inflammation or bleeding. Meckel's diverticulum. A Meckel's diverticulum is a persistent remnant of the vitellointestinal duct and is present in about 2% of the population. It is found on the antimesenteric side of the ileum approximately 60 cm from the ileocecal valve and is classically 5 cm long, 2% prevalence, 2 feet 60 cm, from ileocecal valve, 2 inches 5 cm long. A Meckel's diverticulum is a congenital diverticulum, figure 74.5. It contains all three coats of the bowel wall and has its own blood supply. It may be vulnerable to obstruction and inflammation in the same way as the appendix. Indeed, when a normal appendix is found at surgery for suspected appendicitis, a Meckel's diverticulum should be looked for by examining the small bowel, particularly if free fluid or pus is found, see Chapter 76. In approximately 20% of cases, the mucosa of a Meckel's diverticulum contains heterotopic epithelium of gastric, colonic or pancreatic type. The presence of heterotopic mucosa may predispose to the development of complications, summary box 74.4. The vast majority of Meckel's diverticular are asymptomatic, and a Meckel's diverticulum is notoriously difficult to visualize with contrast radiology. Meckel's diverticulum may however present clinically in the following ways. Hemorrhage. If gastric mucosa is present, peptic ulceration can occur and present as painless dark rectal bleeding or melena. If the stomach, duodenum and colon are excluded as a source of bleeding by endoscopy, radioisotope scanning with technetium-99 meters may demonstrate a Meckel's diverticulum. Diverticulitis. Meckel's diverticulitis presents like appendicitis, although if perforation occurs the presentation may resemble a perforated duodenal ulcer. Intussusception. A Meckel's diverticulum can be the lead point for alveolar or ileocolic intussusception. Chronic ulceration. Pain is felt around the umbilicus, as the site of the diverticulum is midgut in origin. Intestinal obstruction. A band between the apex of the diverticulum and the umbilicus, also part of the vitellointestinal duct, may cause obstruction directly, or by predisposing to the development of a volvulus around it. Perforation. Figure 74.6. When found in the course of abdominal surgery, a Meckel's diverticulum can safely be left alone, provided it has a wide mouth and is not thickened. When there is doubt, it can be resected. The offending of a Meckel's diverticulum in an inguinal or femoral hernia has been described as Litter's hernia. Features of Meckel's diverticulum: filled circle, remnant of vitellointestinal duct. Filled circle occurs in 2% of patients, 5 cm, 2 inches, long, 60 cm, 2 feet, from the ileocecal valve, 20% heterotopic epithelium. Filled circle should be looked for when a normal appendix is found at surgery for suspected appendicitis. Filled circle: if a Meckel's diverticulum is found incidentally at surgery, it can be left provided it has a wide mouth and is not thickened. Filled circle can be a source of gastrointestinal bleeding if it contains ectopic gastric mucosa. Meckel's diverticulectomy: a broad-based Meckel's diverticulum should not be amputated at its base and invaginated, as for an appendix, as there is the risk of stricture and of leaving heterotopic epithelium behind. It is safer simply to excise the diverticulum, either by resecting the diverticulum and suturing the defect at its base or by performing a limited small bowel resection with anastomosis. This can also be achieved with a linear stapler cutter. If the base of the diverticulum is indurated, it is on balance safer to perform a limited small bowel resection of the entire involved segment, followed by an anastomosis. Vascular anomalies of the intestine. Mesenteric ischemia. Mesenteric vascular disease may be classified as acute intestinal ischemia, with or without occlusion, venous, chronic arterial, central or peripheral. The superior mesenteric vessels are the visceral vessels most likely to be affected by embolization or thrombosis. Occlusion at the origin of the SMA is almost invariably the result of thrombosis, whereas emboli tend to lodge at the origin of the middle colic artery. Inferior mesenteric artery involvement is usually clinically silent because of a rich collateral circulation. SMA emboli may be carried from the left atrium in atrial fibrillation, the left ventricle after mural myocardial infarction, vegetations on mitral and aortic valves associated with endocarditis or an atheromatous plaque from an aortic aneurysm. Primary thrombosis is associated with atherosclerosis and vasculitides, including conditions such as thromboangiitis obliterans and polyarteritis nodosa. Primary thrombosis of the superior mesenteric veins may occur in association with factor V Leiden disorder, portal hypertension, portalpemia, sickle cell disease, and in women taking the oral contraceptive pill. A specific of non-occlusive mesenteric ischemia, in which the vessels are normal but FOW is critically reduced, may complicate critical illness, possibly because of alterations in splanchnic blood FOW. Irrespective of whether the occlusion is arterial or venous, hemorrhagic infarction occurs. The mucosa is especially sensitive to ischemic injury because of its high metabolic activity. The intestine and its mesentery become swollen and edematous, especially with venous occlusion. Blood-stained fluid exudes into the peritoneal cavity and bowel lumen. The changes develop rapidly and irreversible injury, ranging in severity from mucosal necrosis and sloughing to full-thickness infarction, usually occurs within 6 hours at most. If the main trunk of the SMA is involved, the infarction usually covers an area from just distal to the DJ flexure to the splenic flexure. Usually, a branch of the main trunk is implicated and the area of infarction is smaller. Clinical features. The most important clue to an early diagnosis of acute mesenteric ischemia is sudden onset of severe abdominal pain in a patient with atrial fibrillation or atherosclerosis. The pain is typically in the central abdomen and is out of all proportion to the physical offendings. Persistent vomiting and defecation occur early, with the subsequent passage of altered blood. Abdominal tenderness may be mild initially, with rigidity being a late feature. Shock, with features of both hypovolemia and sepsis, rapidly ensues. Investigation will usually reveal a profound neutrophil leukocytosis, a severe metabolic acidosis and raised blood lactate. A contrast-enhanced CT scan will show bowel wall enhancement absent or reduced, and there may be free fluid in the abdomen. Gas may be present within the intestinal wall and occasionally in the mesenteric and portal vein, a late and ominous sign. Treatment: mesenteric venous thrombosis may be treated by anticoagulation with close monitoring. An immediate laparotomy with embolectomy or revascularization of the SMA by vascular bypass may be considered in early cases of arterial ischemia, followed by postoperative anticoagulation. However, the condition is usually diagnosed late in the disease process and the mortality rate is extremely high. In the young, all affected bowel should be resected, whereas in the elderly or infirm the situation may be deemed incurable. Where the demarcation between viable and non-viable bowel is uncertain, a planned relook laparotomy may be useful. After extensive enterectomy, it is usual for patients to require intravenous nutrition. The young, however, may sometimes develop sufficient intestinal digestive and absorptive function to lead relatively normal lives. In selected cases, consideration may be given to small bowel transplantation, see Chapter 91. Chronic small intestinal ischemia. Chronic small intestinal ischemia almost invariably results from atherosclerosis and affects the proximal superior mesenteric and celiac vessels. Patients classically present with symptoms of severe central abdominal pain that comes on within 30 to 60 minutes of eating, mesenteric angina. Weight loss and diarrhea due to malabsorption may also occur. The condition may be difficult to diagnose and is often overlooked. The presence of significant vascular disease on CT is common in elderly patients and in those with severe vascular disease and should not necessarily be assumed to indicate that abdominal symptoms are attributable to chronic ischemia. Treatment is usually by selective visceral angiography, with stenting, angioplasty and, where this is not possible, bypass surgery. Smoking cessation is imperative and patients are usually anticoagulated. STOMAS. A stoma is an artificial opening made in the bowel to divert feces and fatus outside the abdomen, where they can be collected in an external appliance. Depending on the purpose for which the diversion has been necessary, a stoma may be temporary or permanent. Stoma's filled circle may be colostomy or ileostomy. Filled circle may be temporary or permanent. Filled circle temporary or defunctioning stomas are usually fashioned as loop stomas. Filled circle and ileostomy is spouted. A colostomy is fouche. Filled circle ileostomy effluent is usually liquid, whereas colostomy effluent is usually solid. Filled circle ileostomy patients are more likely to develop fluid and electrolyte problems. Filled circle and ileostomy is usually sited in the right iliac fossa. Filled circle and colostomy is usually sited in the left iliac fossa. Filled circle whenever possible. Patients should be counseled and cited by a stoma care nurse before operation. Loop ileostomy. A loop ileostomy is often used for defunctioning a low rectal anastomosis or an ileal pouch. A knuckle of ileum is exteriorized through a skin trephine in the right iliac fossa. An incision is made in the distal part of the knuckle, and this is then pulled over the top of the more proximal part to create a spout on the proximal side of the loop with the fouche distal side still in continuity. This allows near perfect defunctioning, but also the possibility of restoration of continuity, by taking down the spout and reanastomosing the partially divided ileum. The advantage of a loop ileostomy over a loop colostomy is the ease with which the bowel can be brought to the surface. Care is needed when the ileostomy is closed such that suture line obstruction does not occur. Closure of a loop ileostomy can be a technically challenging procedure, particularly if there are dense adhesions resulting from previous surgery. End ileostomy. An end ileostomy is formed after a colectomy without anastomosis, when it may later be reversed, or after proctocolectomy, when it is permanent. The ileum is normally brought through the rectus abdominis muscle. Careful attention should be paid to the terminal ileal mesentery to ensure that it is not too bulky. The use of a spout was originally described by Brook. This should project some 2-4 cm from the skin surface, figure 74.7. A disposable appliance is placed over the ileostomy so that it is a snug featuring at skin level. There may be an ileostomy flux, while the ileum adapts to the loss of the colon. While ileostomy output can amount to 4 to 5 liters per day, losses of 1 to 2 liters are more common. A consistent ileostomy output in excess of 1.5 liters is usually associated with dehydration and sodium depletion in the absence of intravenous therapy. Up to 20% of patients may require readmission for the treatment of dehydration after creation of an ileostomy, but the stools thicken in a few weeks and are usually semi-solid in a few months. The help, skill and advice of the stoma care nurse specialist are essential. Modern appliances have transformed stoma care and skin problems are unusual, figure 74.8. Complications of an ileostomy include prolapse, retraction, stenosis, bleeding, fistula and peristomal hernia. Stoma bags and appliances. Stoma output is collected in a disposable adhesive bag. Ileostomy appliances tend to be drainable bags that are left in place for 48 hours, while colostomy appliances are simply changed 2 or 3 times each day. A wide range of such bags is currently available. Many now incorporate an adhesive backing, which can be left in place for several days. In most hospitals, a stoma care service is available to offer advice to patients, to acquaint them with the latest appliances and to provide the appropriate psychological and practical help. Complications of stomas. Stoma complications are underestimated and common. Summary box 74.6. On occasion, these complications require surgical revision. Sometimes, this can be achieved with an incision immediately around the stoma, but on occasion reopening the abdomen and freeing up the stoma may be necessary. Repair of peristomal hernias is particularly technically challenging and the recurrence rate is high. Simple. Suture of the peristomal hernia is associated with an almost 100% risk of recurrence and transfer to the opposite side of the abdomen, or insertion of a piece of prosthetic material within the abdominal wall around the stoma may be necessary. See Chapter 64. Stoma complications. Filled circle. Skin irritation. Filled circle. Filled circle. Filled circle. Prolapse. Retraction. Ischemia. Filled circle. Filled circle. Filled circle. Filled circle. Stenosis. Peristomal hernia. Bleeding. Fistulation. Conditions causing malabsorption. Celiac disease. Celiac disease is the most common cause of malabsorption in the UK with a reported prevalence of 1/1800, although this may be an underestimate. It is characterized by a hypertrophic small bowel mucosa with atrophic villi and deep crypts. Loss of surface area and brush border enzymes results in malabsorption. Celiac disease is caused by an abnormal immune response to gluten, a cereal protein, although the exact mechanism remains unclear. There is a genetic component, as the disease is more common in FRST degree relatives and has an association with HLA-B8. In children, celiac disease presents with steatorrhea and growth retardation. In adults, it may result in diarrhea and weight loss, but many patients simply present with iron deficiency anemia. Some patients develop a characteristic skin rash, dermatitis herpetiformis. The diagnosis is usually made after an endoscopic duodenal biopsy allows pathological examination of the mucosa. A blood test for immunoglobulin anti-tissue transglutaminase, IgG-TTGA, is relatively sensitive and specific for diagnosing celiac disease, making it the preferred test for detection. Measurement of IgA anti-endomysial antibodies, anti-EMA, should be used as a confirmatory test. A duodenal biopsy is usually indicated to confirm the diagnosis. The biopsy usually shows fattening of the mucosa, marked inflammatory changes in characteristic effendings of intraepithelial lymphocytes. All tests should be performed while the patient is on a gluten-containing diet, as false negative tests may occur if on a gluten-free diet. Patients with celiac disease may develop an acute inflammatory condition of the small intestine, ulcerative jejunoitis, and have an increased risk of small bowel lymphoma and adenocarcinoma. The main treatment for celiac disease is the withdrawal of gluten from the diet by avoiding wheat, rye and barley. Surgery does not usually play a role in the management of celiac disease and is primarily reserved for resection of malignancy. Bacterial overgrowth. The small intestine can become colonized with bacteria normally confined to the colon if there is stasis resulting in delayed bacterial clearance, blind loop syndrome, figure 74.9. Similar complications may result from chronic small bowel obstruction, jejunal diverticulosis and ileocolic efestulation. Overgrowth in the upper small intestine results in fat malabsorption due to the deconjugation of bile salts, while vitamin B12 deficiency results from overgrowth more distally. There is usually relatively little effect on carbohydrate or protein metabolism. If steatorrhea occurs, other serious malabsorption features may follow, including glossitis, osteomalacia, paresthesia and peripheral neuropathy. Improvement normally follows after intermittent therapy with oral antibiotics. Metronidazole, ciprofloxacin, tetracycline and rifaximin are commonly used. Definitive treatment is surgical if the anatomical abnormality can be corrected, but this is not always possible. Enterocutaneous fistula, an abnormal connection between the small intestine and the skin, can occur as a result of CD, radiotherapy or abdominal trauma, but the condition most commonly follows a surgical complication, either a leak from an anastomosis or an inadvertent enterotomy. At least 50% of small bowel enterocutaneous fistulae develop after surgery in which no small bowel has been resected as a result of injury to the intestine during division of adhesions. The frequency of this complication has been shown to increase with the number of previous laparotomies. Management of patients with an enterocutaneous fistula can be very challenging, especially when the fistula output is high. DFNAD is greater than 500 ml of effluent per day. The majority of low-output fistulae can be expected to heal spontaneously, provided there is no distal obstruction or disease at the fistula site. Reasons for failure of spontaneous healing also include epithelial continuity between the gut and the skin and an associated complex abscess. The management of fistulae is based on well-established principles. SNAP, see summary box 74.7. An early return to theatre to try to treat the problem definitively, i.e. by attempting to restore bowel continuity. In a septic, malnourished patient is doomed to failure. Principles of management of enterocutaneous fistulae. SNAP, filled circle S, elimination of sepsis and skin protection. Filled circle N, nutrition, a period of parenteral nutrition may well be required. Filled circle A, anatomical assessment. Filled circle P, definitive planned surgery. Infected collections are best identified at CT, figure 74.10, and can be drained percutaneously. Skin protection is important as small bowel effluent is caustic. Nutritional support must include fluid and electrolytes, which can be lost in high quantities from a proximal fistula, as well as carbohydrates, protein, fat and vitamins. Judgments have to be made between enteral and parenteral feeding. Enteral feeding has advantages, but if the fistula is proximal or high output, total parenteral nutrition will be required. Deepening a fistula anatomy is best done after careful discussion with the radiologist. A sequence of contrast studies, follow-through, a fistulogram and enema, may well be required to deepen bowel length and plan a surgical strategy. Surgery can be extremely technically demanding and an anastomosis should be avoided in the presence of continuing intra-abdominal sepsis or when the patient is hypoalbuminemic, less than 32 grams per deciliter. Short bowel syndrome, intestinal failure. Intractable diarrhea with impaired absorption of nutrients following resection or bypass of the small intestine, ultimately leading to progressive malnutrition, is referred to as short bowel syndrome. When a patient is unable to maintain satisfactory fluid, electrolyte or nutritional homeostasis without intravenous administration of fluid, electrolytes or nutrients, they are said to have intestinal failure. The mainstay of treatment for intestinal failure is parenteral nutrition. The most common causes of short bowel syndrome are resection resulting from the management of CD and its complications, which accounts for almost half of cases, mesenteric vascular thrombosis, radiation enteritis and tumors. Although features of short bowel syndrome usually appear when there is less than 200 centimeters of small bowel, the length and nature of the remaining intestine are also important. In general, diseases that result in short bowel syndrome tend to preferentially affect the distal small intestine, and there is some evidence that the ileum, with its tighter intercellular junctions and consequently better fluid absorptive capacity, can assume the functions of a missing jejunum, but not vice versa. While the ileocecal valve used to be considered important with regard to preservation of absorptive function, it is more likely that this is a reflection of the associated preservation of the distal ileum and right colon than the valve itself. Patients with an intact colon are relatively protected from the effects of massive small bowel resection because of the ability of the colon to absorb not only fluid and electrolytes but also a modest amount of nutrient energy. Patients with as little as 100–200 centimeters of jejunum anastomosed to an intact colon may therefore be able to maintain satisfactory macronutrient, fluid and electrolyte status, although they will, of course, be at risk of fat-soluble and B12 vitamin deficiencies and will also generally need oral nutritional supplements of trace elements, vitamins and minerals. Some, but not all, patients with 50 to 100 cm of small intestine and an intact colon will have intestinal failure, as will almost all patients with 50 centimeters or less of jejunum anastomosed to an intact colon. In contrast, most patients with less than 200 centimeters and virtually all with less than 100 centimeters of small intestine ending in a stoma will have intestinal failure and will require long-term parenteral nutrition. Medical management of patients with short bowel syndrome relies on the use of antidiarrheal agents, loperamide and codeine phosphate, drugs to reduce diarrhea related to bile salt malabsorption, cholestyramine, drugs to reduce the increased gastric acid secretion resulting from the loss of the small bowel, brake on gastric acid production, proton pump inhibitors, and enteral and parenteral vitamin and trace element supplements. Although there has also been interest in the use of drugs to promote intestinal adaptation, such as growth hormone, glutamine and, most recently, glucagon-like peptide 2 agonists, the mainstay of treatment for short bowel syndrome remains home parenteral nutrition, HPN. The development of this treatment in the late 1960s enabled the majority of patients with short bowel syndrome to enjoy a reasonably good quality of life, with long-term survival related principally to the underlying disease. HPN is, however, expensive and demanding and patients are at risk from catheter-related complications, notably catheter-related sepsis and occlusion, as well as metabolic complications, fibrotic liver disease, gallstones, metabolic bone disease and kidney stones. Surgical procedures designed to improve the surface area or reduce the speed of transit of the remaining small intestine, and thus improve absorptive capacity, have shown some promise in children, but their place in managing adults with established short bowel syndrome currently remains unclear. In some patients, the loss of venous access resulting from the complications of long-term intravenous feeding or the development of progressive liver dysfunction may represent indications for small bowel transplantation. The results of small bowel transplantation have progressively improved and 5-year patient survival now exceeds 80% in some centers.